Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Illuminating series. My name is Nathan Gregg, and I'm the Development Manager at Care Partners. We also have Holly Bowman on with Lumina as a co-host monitoring the chat today. Thank you so much for joining us. Before we get started, we'd like to get an idea of who's in the room. So there should be a slide on the screen. If you wouldn't mind taking a moment and writing in the chat one of those 6 categories that you might fall under, and you can just put the number 1 through 6, whatever you feel, just so we have an idea of who's here, and Jamie can kind of edit and change any information she might be giving out today. So as everyone's doing that, today we'll be hearing all about the role of death doulas and revolutionizing end-of-life care and hospice teams. Our presenter today, Jamie Thrower, is a certified death doula, grieving and loss educator, and is the founder of Queer Grief Club, an activity-based peer support group in Portland, Oregon. Jamie focuses her end-of-life work on the LGBTQ plus advocacy and specializes in working with individuals and families navigating medical aid and dying. We ask that any questions you have, feel free to pop in the chat. We'll kind of collect them and have a big portion at the end, and Jamie might open it up where you can say them in person as well. And then also keep in mind that this presentation is being recorded, and a recording will be available to you afterwards, either emailed or posted to our YouTube channel. And with that, it looks like we have a good response, and I will pass it over to Jamie.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for having me today. I am going to share my screen really quick. Here we go. Okay, so I am here to kind of talk about death doulas. What do we do? How do we be involved in end-of-life care? And how do we add kind of value to end-of-life care and end-of-life teams instead of, I think, what oftentimes is the misconception that we are extracting from care, or that there might be kind of fractures in care because people don't necessarily understand the differences between death doulas and hospice teams. And so I just want to talk about kind of what I do, how death doulas kind of change what the landscape looks like for folks who are facing the end of their life, and kind of how we can continue to do this work together as a community. So a little about me. I am a certified death doula. I was certified by an international career college, but also had a decade of experience, hands-on experience in my personal life, caring for my dying parents and friends' dying parents. I'm a grief and loss educator. I do a lot of educational content on Instagram and try and create kind of a more grief literate world and provide more spaces for people to talk about grief, but also to learn about grief and bereavement and kind of how to support other people in that. I'm also a funeral celebrant, and I am the founder of Queer Grief Club, which is an activity focused support group-ish kind of that I created for LGBTQ folks who are grieving, which is really giving people kind of more ways to engage with their grief. I do workshops, I do art classes and movement workshops. I have done gardening and plant and seed exchanges. So there's really a lot of creativity in that. And really it's about bolstering community and helping kind of the more marginalized folks within grief support, which are queer folks. That's my community. So helping us kind of find community within each other and supporting our grief in different and unique ways. My special areas of focus in my death work and also in my grief work are, of course, LGBTQ plus advocacy, both at the end of life and in bereavement care. But I also specialize in working with people who choose medical aid in dying or VSED, voluntary stopping eating and drinking. I've done a lot of client coordination, planning, and then of course kind of companioning people through that process, and making sure that everything goes according to their plan. And then I also have a background in expressive arts and grief. I self-publish zines about grief and loss and end of life, and really try to create more workshops and work around being able to use the expressive arts in grief and loss. It sounds like there are a lot of hospice volunteers here, but even some people who are interested in death doula work. And then, of course, there are physicians and nurses and people who are working in hospice care. And so I find that people are starting to get a little more familiar, I guess, with the word death doula, but really, like, what are they and what do we do? So a death doula is a non-medical professional who provides emotional and spiritual practical support to individuals and their families kind of during this end of life journey. And I would say the emphasis for most people is on the education and kind of connecting of resources or helping in the more holistic and community care aspects of end of life. So a lot of the time I am reiterating what doctors have already told clients. I am making sure that their families are understanding what their disease progression might look like or what caring for them might look like. And I'm making sure that they feel empowered and they have kind of all the information that they might be looking for, or they might not know they can look for, so that they really have the most the end of life experience that they want to have in a way that they feel like they were given the most information and were able to make choices for themselves or their family members that feel empowered and true to them. Unfortunately, death doulas are not covered by health insurance, so there's a big range right now for fees. Most people, I would say, are private practice. A lot are volunteer. I personally charge a sliding scale in order to be equitable and try and be accessible to my community. And that is also, of course, another focus in my work as a death doula, which is really just trying to help kind of bridge access barriers that people struggle with in end of life care. So a kind of non-exhaustive role list of things that death doulas can do, but these are generally what most death doulas are trained in, which is emotional support, which is offering compassionate presence, actively listening to patients. A lot of the time we are doing anticipatory grief work. We are facilitating difficult conversations between family members, or we're just holding space for someone who is within a transition in their life, whether they have just received a diagnosis or they are actively dying or they are struggling within their family in this way. So there's a lot of emotional support that death doulas give. Education, again, like I said, is a huge part. Providing information about end-of-life options, rituals, or cultural practices. I can't tell you the amount of times that my clients say it's just so nice to talk to someone who isn't afraid to talk about death and say the words death and died and really kind of get into the nitty-gritty without trying to kind of dance around it or put a positive spin on it or try and get them to not think about that quite yet. Like, a lot of people really do want that information and they want to feel like they have everything that they need to make choices for themselves. So a lot of education is a huge part. And then advocacy. Advocacy, I would say, is the biggest part of being a death doula, being able to advocate for the patient's wishes, and within the healthcare system and within the family and support network. There's a lot of negotiating that has to go on. And I think that that's where we can really excel, by knowing the systems that are already in place and what hospice teams look like, or what end of life care in a hospital looks like. And then we can kind of help negotiate how we can get our client to get the things that they want within those systems. And so how can we advocate? Can we make sure that they are having the best experience that they can have within the confines of wherever they are or whatever their situation is? Legacy work is huge. And this is where creativity comes in, and people, there are so many death doulas that specialize in so many different things. I love doing legacy work with folks, and I have a 10-year background in professional photography. So I end up doing portrait sessions, or I've done end of life sessions, and that kind of legacy work that really gives people that kind of life review and that feeling of completion, or being able to feel like they're kind of tying up those ends in order for them to leave this world and go on to the next adventure. And then companionship, the gift of time, the gift of being able to help alleviate kind of the sense of isolation that's felt not only by the people who are dying, but especially their family or their caregivers, who might feel really overwhelmed, or feel like they have no control and they're struggling with feeling helpless. Death doulas can really provide a lot of support and normalization kind of in the dying process for families, where I find a lot of care teams might not have kind of that flexibility in time. And so, when I'm thinking about death doulas and how I want to kind of fit within the bigger healthcare system and what is kind of out there today, and I'm looking at how we can add the value, how we can support these spaces. So in hospice care, we're enhancing the services provided by hospice teams. We are not trying to supplement or to, become or to take the place, I guess, of the hospice teams or the individuals within hospice teams, but we are here to enhance the services, to go deeper into something with somebody that maybe their social worker or their chaplain might not be able to give them that time. We're able to really work with families and be able to give them that kind of support, where hospice team might be more focused on the individual at the time. And so it really just, it feels like an extension of hospice, and in a way to kind of that we can help support the work that you're doing by giving patients more education, by helping them understand what your services are and how to utilize them, and also helping with the comprehension of kind of, what an end of life experience can look like, and how to make that the best experience that they can have. At the home, of course, there's a ton of support that we can give, and respite care, and for people who are choosing to receive end of life care in their homes. There's a lot of transition and being able to even help people kind of acclimate to that new normal if they're being discharged on home hospice. And then, of course, complementing care in assisted living and nursing homes, being that kind of steady companion or person for an individual, especially if they don't have family nearby. And sometimes what I've been told is having somebody there that I know is an advocate for my person, that feels like they've got a good eye on them can be really, really helpful for family members who might be far away or might not have a good understanding of kind of what the situation is. And then, of course, in hospitals, bridging that gap in emotional support and kind of advocacy within hospital systems for our patients. And so why death doulas? What is the need, and how do we help? I think we are facing, anyone who works in healthcare we are always talking about like facing this kind of unprecedented amount of a large population that is aging. And that we also have a scarcity in providers in care. And so palliative and hospice teams often have a really limited amount of time to be with the family or to be with the person. And I hear from people all the time that there's just a lot of misconception about what hospice does and how they support people. And so families can feel really confused or feel like they didn't know that hospice wasn't providing caregiving services, and so being able to even describe and help families understand what hospice does and where they need to fill the other places of support can be really beneficial. And then of course, as I said, providing extra layers of emotional support, especially with grief and bereavement, things like anticipatory grief, and being able to help in that way without time constrictions or kind of like set limits. But I think one of the biggest pieces that I've seen and that I've seen personally, and I'll talk about this in a couple of case studies, is that death doulas really reinforce education for better patient compliance and family caregiver comprehension. This helps reduce miscommunications between providers and patients. This helps patients have a better idea of why hospice teams might be suggesting a certain medication or saying, I don't think that medication is the right one for you. I find a lot of people can have a lot of distrust in medical systems. And so being able to have someone that is seen more as a community member and an advocate that helps reinforce that information, and that also can find alternative ways to communicate why patient compliance is really important, is so helpful. A death doula also serves as the eyes and the ears of palliative hospice care programs and can kind of be that non-biased person without kind of the emotional connection to the family. Not to say that, we have, of course, deep emotional connections to our clients and are very big advocates for them, but to be able to still communicate in a way to hospice teams to have a better idea of what might be going on, that gives that kind of extra insight and context for patient behaviors or dynamics, or who just might be able to see like a little bigger of a picture because they're able to spend more time with clients. And then, of course, death doulas can take the time to address and can also help fill the holes or in places where there has been fractured care, or if there have been kind of disagreements or conflict within like families and hospice teams or individuals. But overall, one of the biggest advantages that death doulas can bring is the continuity of care and the consistent support. And I think that is, in a system like we are in with healthcare, when people's healthcare gets changed all the time, and then they have to change doctors, and there's, people really feel like their care is fragmented. And so to be able to have a consistent person that's really following someone and is invested in being their advocate is really makes a huge difference in what an end-of-life experience can be. So quickly, benefits for individuals and families, of course, that is really why we do this work, which is to enhance their quality of life, to reduce their anxiety, help them navigate these unknown aspects of end of life care. Oftentimes, most people are learning about end of life when they are in it in real time, and families are grieving and individuals are grieving and they're in chaos. And so there's so much anxiety, and there's so much of it that feels unnatural or or stress inducing to them. And so doulas really have the time and the education to really normalize that process and to help them navigate it, and to kind of be a constant reassurance that that they are being taken care of, and that this is okay and this is a normal process. And then, of course, dignity and autonomy, support in decision making, expressing personal wishes. I think, being able to give people permission to lean into their end of life experience. I had someone the other day who was almost, seemed embarrassed to ask this, but was like, is it weird to think about what my friend might want to wear on the day, that she dies? And I was like, that no, of course that's not what, like, yes, let's talk about this more, and like, here's some ways that you could ritualize a death, and here's why people find it important to think about clothes or music or whatever. So people really don't necessarily know that what they can and can't ask, or what they might be able to choose or not choose. And so being able to kind of restore that is a really beautiful gift. And then, of course, legacy preservation and the reduced family burden, alleviating stress for loved ones, letting people know that there's more help, and there's more support, and just really again normalizing that process for them. But I think what is something we don't talk about a lot, which is the benefits for practitioners and the benefits for our healthcare system as a whole, which is complementary care. We're working in conjunction with medical professionals. We're really trying to be kind of an added service that feels like we're working as part of the team, or uplifting the hospice team. There's improved communication. Oftentimes, family members are able to tell me, or they ask me to communicate with practitioners or with their nurses or social workers, because they get so much anxiety in talking to medical professionals, and they say that they just feel like they can't articulate what they want to say. So even if whether it's me being the communication kind of connector, or being able to kind of coach them on how to have conversations with their doctors, or how to have conversations with their nurses, or other practitioners that they're working with. Ideally, reduced burnout. I mean, I don't think I know a single person who works in end of life work, and especially in nonprofit end of life work, who is looking to increase their caseload. I think a lot of people, we are taking on an incredible amount of work. Burnout is huge. And so when we are welcoming in more people to kind of help share that load, we're able to give a little bit more back to ourselves. The expanded services, so being able to provide, even if it's just a referral to a death doula that maybe is either part of someone's community, or has a specialization in music theory, or whatever it might be. There are so many death doulas that have so many different practices, or just are really connected within the community, to be able to pull resources in new and imaginative ways that you might not have thought of. And then professional development. We love education. We love doing education for community members, for groups. And so there's a lot of opportunities for hospices and death doulas to kind of collaborate together, to do workshops or to do community outreach, and just really kind of create better places for us to talk about end-of-life care, to do that education with community so that they have better experiences when they come into our care. And so I wanted to do a quick couple of case studies, just where these were people that I was hired to be a death doula with, and I worked with their hospice teams, and just wanted to kind of share what that was like, and kind of the ways that we worked together. So the first client was a 75-year-old gay man. I was hired because he was looking for someone specifically part of the LGBTQ community. He had a lot of, he was very nervous and had a lot of distrust of medical professionals. He had stage 4 COPD and heart failure, and was, I mean, in and out of the ER almost every day. High anxiety, and had no family or caregivers. He had a friend who was his medical power of attorney, but someone who he didn't see very often. And at the end of the day, you know, when I was really talking with him and trying to kind of identify what it was that he was needing, I mean, heartbreakingly enough, he said, I really just need someone here to hold my hand. And so there was a lot of before even he got enrolled in hospice, there was a lot of kind of frustration, of course, on the ED's department. You know, every time he would come in and he was short of breath, and they would say, we sent you home with, you know, lorazepam. I'm not sure what, you know, what else we can do for you. And so being able to have someone that he could call first before he went to an ED was really helpful. And I could help kind of ground him to the place where he could get to a point where he could make the decision for himself. Did he feel like he could take the medication that might help reduce his anxiety and help him feel like he's getting better breath, or does he really believe that he needs to go to the ED? I also assisted with getting him enrolled in the hospice program, and in that he struggled with medication compliance and would get very overwhelmed with medications and which medications to use. And he had a difficult time remembering things, and could at times have a prickly personality. So there were a lot of frustrations from the hospice team in feeling like they had enrolled him and they were trying to help him, and he was not helping. He was not like being compliant. So I was able to really do a lot of work with him and kind of uncover that there were bigger emotional needs that were not being met. And there were also bigger trauma triggers that were causing him to not be compliant, that were causing him to kind of let anxiety take over before he could get into his rational mind and be able to do what hospice was asking him to do. And so we were able to really work through that together. He ended up wanting to pursue medical aid in dying, and the hospice medical director had a lot of questions kind of about what my thoughts were around his comprehension and being eligible, and then also asking questions about what it would be like to be the prescribing doctor. And as someone who specializes in that work and is very connected to some of the organizations that also do this work around medical aid and dying, I was able to answer those questions from the medical director and connect him to the right people that could help him with the process of writing the prescription. And so it ended up going well, but I think that if I or another doula had not been there, you know, the hospice team was saying that they were getting to a point of feeling like they were going to disenroll him from hospice because they felt like he wasn't being compliant. But there wasn't you know, what I was able to do was go in there really just as a non-medical person and get to the root of the issue, which I would hope that, you know, that he would have been able to get to at some point, but I know that it's easy for people to fall through care too. So that was one where we worked really hard together, me and his hospice team, to really give him the care that he needed, when he didn't always make it easy to do. The second client is someone that I just worked with very recently, had Parkinson's and congestive heart failure, and decided to use medical aid in dying. And so his care team had already taken care of all of the logistical parts of getting the medication and seeing the doctors. But his wife was really overwhelmed with the transition into hospice, with trying to figure out how she was going to live kind of without her husband, who was the primary person who took care of all the bills. And so there was a lot of both respite care that I provided so that she could do some of that stuff, but also facilitating kind of those conversations and being able to make sure that she felt really like she had all the information that she needed to get from him, so that she wasn't fully overwhelmed in his death. And then one of the most beautiful things that I've done was really coordinating with the hospice team to create such a special kind of death event for when he ingested the medicine for medical aid in dying. And so I worked with their hospice chaplain, and we created like a program that we gave to people who came on the day of ingestion, that both kind of outlined how they can best show up for the client and their family. The client was very clear that he wanted, a lot of quiet, and didn't want a lot of talking. And so we kind of laid that out for them. We also described what the process of watching someone ingest the lethal medication, what that looks like, so that people were able to be there and they were informed, they knew what to expect. And then also assisting with kind of ritual bathing, decorating of the body post-death, and then coordinating with the hospice team and a whole body donation program at OHSU. So it was really, there were a lot of different parts and moving parts. And what I found was the wife really needed someone to help her keep all of those points kind of connected, and reassuring to her that all things were really going according to plan. And then, of course, needing more emotional support, but also physical support on the day of ingestion. And then the third client is someone that I'm working with right now, who is a non-binary person, assigned female at birth, and they are 33, and they have metastatic breast cancer. Their prognosis is 6 months to 2 years. So they are not necessarily eligible for hospice yet. But right now, what we are doing is we're really working through a lot of kind of their emotional support, through their diagnosis, through treatment. We're talking a lot about what hospice versus palliative care looks like. We're exploring their ideas around their mortality and the quality and quantity of their life, and what they might want when they get to a point of needing more care. So do they want to die in a hospital? Do they want to die at home? And how can they make that happen? But then also, making sure that I feel prepared to be an advocate for them as someone who is non-binary, and in a world of especially something like breast cancer, which is very gendered. There's a lot of providers that are not necessarily taking into account their identity. And so, being able to be prepared to advocate for them, to make sure that they feel affirmed in the care that they're getting. This is going to help them, be able to enroll in hospice in a time that feels right for them, not when it feels too late, or that they'll be able to feel like they can make these kind of decisions in a way that feels empowering to them, and that they know how to talk about all these different options with their doctors and their care team. So overall, we are our healthcare landscape is a mess, and it's constantly changing, but I feel like it's asking us for more creative and interconnected models of patient-centered care. It's asking us to think outside the box with how we make sure that people are being taken care of and feel supported, and in a place where there's generally not enough support to go around. And I love this quote from the National End of Life Doula Alliance, which is generally a really good resource and is at the forefront of kind of the doula movement, which is end of life doulas are a steadfast presence in the dying arena who are equipped to offer vital services that cross all cultural boundaries, bringing comfort to all, regardless of race, gender, economic means, urban or rural settings, other factors that may inhibit delivery of services in other sectors. And I think that is, again, something that I feel really passionate about, which is making sure that people feel like they have access to information, that they are feeling like they are in culturally competent care, and that they really see or feel seen and valued for who they are, especially at the end of their life. So I'm really all about bringing community back into death care. It has been since the beginning of time something that we did as a community. And I think that, being able to bring in more community members who are supportive of end of life, who are willing and ready to create, more death literate conversations and society, and by being able to work, together and kind of carry this load, that we can really create better experiences for people at the end of their life. So I wanted to, these are ways to stay in touch with me. I often do workshops. I love doing grief work with folks. And so if you also, of course, if you are ever come across someone within the queer community that's looking for extra assistance or is needing to be connected to someone within their community, I love doing that. And then really, I wanted to kind of open up the floor for a discussion and for questions, because I think that that's really where the value is, which is just kind of talking to each other, answering the questions that you all have about death doulas, how this all works. I think that there's a lot to, a whole other presentation would be how to actually integrate death doulas into these systems, the logistical parts, which I think nonprofits tend to have the ability to get grants, or there's a lot of creative solutions for how to add in doulas or referral systems into your care. But yeah, just wanted to open it up for questions. I will check the chat, and then you can also raise your hand. So let me just stop sharing my screen. Okay. So Dave, I'm going to just start off with the first question from David, and which is, are you worried that almost anyone can claim to be a death doula, no standards or basic requirements? Yeah, I think that's genuinely, it's a thing that we should all be concerned about. And also, I think that we have to start thinking about how we want either community members or death doulas to work within our own organizations if there's not going to be a bigger standard of care or certification regulation. So, that becomes this kind of like, well, like, how would I know, how am I going to know if that death doula is going to know anything about, if anyone can just call themselves a death doula, then how do I know that I'm getting someone who is legit or who is really going to work within my team? And so I think that that's where starting to find what are the places that feel like you could use death doulas, and when you think about a death doula, what are the parts that feel the most important to you? If you were going to have a certification, like, what are the places that you feel like would need to be covered? Therefore, are we creating doula programs within hospices that are, this is a doula training program, and if you do this doula training program, you can be a part of a referral system for our hospice, or just getting kind of creative with that. I think it also we need to just be able to look at the places where people are getting their certifications. There are some that are very, very reputable places that you can get certifications, and then being able to also, like, if you're going to have doulas work within your either hospice program or healthcare system, just knowing like what boundaries or kind of limitations you want to put on that. Claire, what first step should I take towards becoming a death doula? Any certifications? Yes. Yeah, I really believe in, there's two programs. There's Going with Grace, which is by Alua Arthur. She's a Black death doula in LA, and her program is considered to be one of the best. It's also very well-rounded, and you get a lot of support as a doula afterwards within like their community. I also really recommend the University of Vermont. I have worked with their program director, and they just have a really comprehensive program, and that works a lot within hospital settings. That kind of started from healthcare setting or from a hospital setting, and so that's another one that I really recommend. There are also, for people who are like a little more curious but not necessarily like ready to go get a certification or to invest in that way, there's oftentimes a lot of like weekend workshops or different classes that other death doulas take. So even if you just want to get a little more information on how to show up better for people who are dying, or how to hold space, or how to, kind of add value to even just being a hospice volunteer, there's a lot of ways that you can get that kind of education, or like dip your toes in a little bit into that world. Beyond grants or private pay, do you know of any insurances or other that cover death doula services? I personally don't, and that's something that I'm really hoping to look more into, because generally with, when I'm serving people, I offer sliding scale, and then I also always hope to get creative if my clients need to. And some people have, asked for donations from friends and families to cover the cost of a death doula. Some people have set up GoFundMe's. I wish that did not exist, because I don't think that, we should have, there just should be more support. I wish we could get covered by health insurance. I with health insurance didn't have to be a factor, in that that money didn't have to be such a complicating factor, but it's something that I'm continuously looking into. It's also why, as a death doula, I do a lot of extra work outside of my practice. to kind of cover the costs for when I need to do things pro bono or volunteer. But I think that those, my gosh, that's a bigger conversation for that goes kind of beyond my comprehension, which is, you know, how we really dismantle healthcare insurance and be able to give care to people all the time without having to worry about the confines of capitalism. But how much does it cost to hire a death doula? It's very, very, very varied. Very varied. It's you know, for hands-on work, I've seen everything from $35 an hour to like 100 and something plus an hour. Really depends on if it's more consulting work and patient or kind of paperwork for patients, or if it's more hands-on vigil work or kind of exploring with families. Some people do packages, some people do so it's really varied. And I think that can be also another difficult thing, is that it's hard to kind of to say like, oh yes, this is, you just need $500 to get a death doula, because we all know that trajectories of death and end of life can look very different for people. So that's really kind of a negotiating factor between a doula and the family. So I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for that. I'm just reading what Naomi is writing. We have an end-of-life doula volunteer position at Hospice. And to go into that role, we would want you to go through a reputable program. Yes. And spend at least a couple of years with us volunteering with patients to gain experience. Yes. Agreed. And I think that that's something that's really interesting, is like when I work at a couple, or I volunteer at a couple of organizations, and I have applied to volunteer at a couple of organizations. And a lot of the time people have said, you know, we're worried about doulas coming to volunteer. We're worried about doulas coming to volunteer because what if they just are trying to build up their businesses, or they're trying to poach clients? And I think that, you know, that being able to have a volunteer program where doulas can come and get that hands-on experience is, yes, that's of course, like to me, that's kind of a win-win. Like you're getting people who are interested, who are who value this work, who really are hungry for the hands-on work. And they're also building up their skills and being able to figure out what it is that they want, you know, what makes sense for them in their doula practice. What do they like doing? Do they like just doing the kind of emotional support, or are they really like into the legacy work? And I think that by hospices starting to kind of take a lead on in implementing volunteer programs for that, and then creating those safeguards, like we want you to be we want you to have come from a reputable program. We want to know that you're gonna be you're gonna give us a volunteer commitment of however much time, you know, makes sense to you. And then, you know, maybe there's some sort of additional, you know, either boundaries or whatever it may be. But being able to utilize the people who are especially coming out of training and wanting to get work. I mean, who better to do that work, but within kind of a system that is already really serving patients and doing work in a way that really helps people than hospice. It doesn't make sense for people to learn about the death and dying kind of process and how to be a death doula and then just go out rogue on their own. You know, there's so much to learn in patient care, and to do that within a team is really valuable. So I think that having, you know, even a volunteer position that again is not taking away the position of someone else, that's not a supplement for a chaplain or a social worker or anything, but is really just kind of continued and enhanced care. and being able to give more resources or services to our clients is really helpful. Are there any other questions? We have, I think, about 10 minutes left. Are there any other questions that you have, either about doula work or any of the work that I do outside of death work? Always happy to answer, or just if anyone wants to share any experiences of either working with doulas or, you know, worries, whatever, happy to answer them.
If you feel comfortable, you can unmute your mic and speak, and then if not, raise your hand, and we can unmute you as well. We'll give everyone a few more seconds.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I loved your presentation. Thank you so much. I'm curious, in your work with the queer community at end of life, what kind of, I don't know, particular issues or challenges come up related to being in that position, you know, being queer and at end of life? I'm a social worker at Lumina, so it's just trying to learn a little bit more in order to be empathetic and be supportive.
Yeah. Yeah, you know, I've found that there's a lot of different things that kind of come that become, how do I say this in the right way, that just become a difficult dynamic for people to have to consider, or kind of, there's just a unique set of challenges that queer people face at the end of their life, and especially for you know, gender non-conforming, non-binary, trans people within medical settings are already like very distrustful and generally don't have great experiences, especially with regards to their identity and kind of how people are addressing them. I'd say that's like maybe one of the number one difficulties, is when people are saying like, I'm in hospice care and, you know, I have one person that like will not, you know, use the right pronouns for me, or is consistently referring to me as a name that I do not go by anymore. Also kind of making sure that those plans, that people's identities are really honored throughout death as well. And so there's also like the next of kin piece. A lot of people don't necessarily, or have like, you know, expanded families, or aren't connected to their bio families, or have just different family systems that aren't necessarily considered in traditional healthcare. And so being able to make sure that people are filling out, you know, it's not just about, oh, do you know if you want to be cremated or not, but like, who is responsible for your body afterwards? Have you filled out an appointment of persons form so that it's not left to your biological dad that does not talk to you anymore, and that like, you know, disowned you, you know, when you were a teenager or whatever, and that making sure that they have, you know, their healthcare power of attorney and their healthcare proxy really dialed in, and with people that they feel like they can trust. But ultimately I feel like there's just a huge need for advocating within kind of the healthcare systems, which we are still as a society like really struggling to kind of get trans care and queer competent care right. And so I think that there's just a lot of advocacy, and being able to really see people for who they are and what they might be experiencing at the end of their life, There's so much kind of questioning and a lot of life review that happens, and oftentimes just wanting to do that with people that they feel like they don't have to explain themselves to. So just even, you know, having the awareness to connect people with queer services or queer-centered services, or asking them if that's something that's important to them. I think that that's something that we don't think about enough, and can add like this extra layer of feeling seen and feeling safe in someone's care.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts?
It's so quiet. I just wanted to say it's nice to meet you, Jamie. I'm glad you're here.
Thank you.
I'm a volunteer coordinator at Lumina and also got my end of life doula certificate because there's a huge need. I feel like you can never have too many end of life doulas, people working the non-medical part. So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
important. And I just
Yeah.
wanted to mention too that there's death cafes. They're
Mm-hmm.
great places to go to continue these conversations. And a
Yes.
lot of end of life doula people interested in that, or who are alone and have no one at end of life, they're trying to figure out what to do, or
Yeah.
at death cafes.
Yes. Yes. I love that that's like right. That's happening right in the chat too. That perfect timing for that, because I think there is also you know, something that I think that's really valuable about end of life doulas is that it's not necessarily like, yes, we are focusing on the patient, we're making sure that they feel empowered and all of that stuff, but we're also really people who want to know just more about death, or who want to engage in their own mortality, or who want to know just how to show up for the people in their life who are dying, or who might, you know, I oftentimes have people who come to me and say, oh my gosh, my best friend's dad is dying. I have no idea what to do. I have no idea how to show up. Or you know, my grandma just got enrolled in hospice, and I like, how do I be there for her? I like get scared every time I go in the room, you know? And so being able to even just, death doulas can really like help normalize that process. There are death cafes. I run a book club where, you know, anyone is invited to come and read their own book or check some out from our kind of collection about end of life or grief, and then we just talk about it and have open conversations. And so death doulas are really kind of leading this front on the death education, and just being able to have more conversations about you know, the one thing that we all fundamentally experience as a human, but we love to just pretend like doesn't exist. I think I'm not, you know, this is not the obviously the community that pretends it doesn't exist, because we're in there and we're doing this work, but our greater society, like we really just don't know how to talk about death. And so even just being someone that can be that to somebody else, that can sit with someone and bear witness to what they're experiencing, or to have open dialogues about death and dying, is so refreshing to those who really need it. So I think that there's just, you know, death cafes are so great. Workshops, kind of one-off classes. I'm working on like a series for the new year of kind of like book club style, but like being able to just engage with your own mortality and your thoughts and beliefs around it, and some journaling practices. So there's a lot of people who are really wanting to just you know, explore our humanity together. And I think that that's a really great thing. And so glad you guys have a doula volunteer program at your hospice.
Yeah, we had a volunteer that was here for many years who then then got certified and really he really evolved from that experience, really went deeper.
Yeah.
I saw the benefits of it, and he followed some patients through and did wonderfully. I mean, it was a great position. And I'm very particular about who I put in that position.
Right. Yeah.
They
Mhm.
really need to spend a couple years with hospice before they go into that role where they're spending more time with the patients too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that that's where, that's also where hospice or other organizations can really help with this idea of there not being regulations around certifications. So, yes, we all need more non-medical support. We need more, people who are willing to give some time, but how do we make sure that we are doing so in an ethical way, that we are bringing on people that are aligned with our mission and how we relate to patients and how we talk to and serve our patients. So yeah, that's great. Okay, we're at 1 o'clock. I know that, no one ever wants to stay on Zoom longer than than they want, but just really thank you all so much for being here and for listening and for your questions. And really, truly, like, however I can be of support, or if you ever have questions or want to collaborate on something, or just, want some more queer advocacy in your organization, however I can help. I love being involved with hospices and just getting to know other practitioners in the area. So thank you. And yes, I will send a copy of the PowerPoint. Yes, I will. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jamie, and thank you all for attending. So after this, we'll be sending out an email which will contain the video of the actual Illuminating series talk here, as well as the PowerPoint that Jamie had included. And thank you so much, and we hope you join us next month for our next one. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye, y'all.